Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Hey everyone, glad to be here.
If you are listening to this, you are probably looking for something that goes a little deeper than the standard headlines. You want the signal, not the noise.
Absolutely.
And today, well, we are looking at a signal that is flashing bright red. We're tackling a book that is part manifesto, part history lesson, and honestly, part war manual.
Yeah, it really is.
It's got a title that takes up the entire cover, and frankly, it screams banned book energy. We are talking about Conrad Reicher's Feminist, Misandrist, Agit, prop satanic communist psyops against boys, men, and masculinity.
It is certainly a title that, well, it filters the audience right off the bat. Riker isn't interested in a casual reader here.
No, not at all.
He is clearly writing for a specific audience. He's looking for men who are ready to have their worldview not just challenged, but completely dismantled. It's very much targeted at, men's rights activists and guys in that red-pilled manosphere space.
Exactly. And before we even crack the spine on this thing, I need to be really clear with you guys listening.
Yeah, we should definitely put this out there.
Right. This book contains some incredibly politically charged content. I mean, we are talking intense critiques of both left-wing and right-wing sacred cows.
Extremely charged.
So to be clear, we are not taking sides today. We are not endorsing Reicher's viewpoints or the politics of this book. We are simply reporting impartially on the content provided and trying to convey the ideas contained in his original source material.
We're just the messengers unpacking the arguments.
Exactly. And we're going to cover his core arguments. But I have to tell you, this book is massive. It is ultra long, incisive, and fascinating in a way that's hard to fully capture here.
You really can't get all the nuance in just one conversation.
Right. So do yourself a favor, hit pause, go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now, and buy the ebook. You need to see the primary sources he's citing for yourself to really get it. And while you're at it, make sure you like and subscribe to this deep dive so you don't miss our future breakdowns.
For sure. So, just to set the stage for you listening, Reicher's central thesis isn't just that men are having a hard time or that the economy shifted.
It's way heavier than that.
Far more radical. His argument is that Western society is currently under the influence of an engineered, intentional, psychological operation.
A psyop.
A literal psyop.
Yes. And the goal of this operation, according to Reicher, is the systematic dismantling of male identity, the destruction of the nuclear family, and effectively the end of Western civilization as we understand it.
He calls it the red pill on steroids.
Okay.
He actually says up front this isn't a self-help book. He hates that term.
Yeah, he makes that very clear.
He frames this as a survival guide for a war you didn't even know you were fighting.
Yeah.
So let's get into the trenches. One of the first concepts he introduces to back up this psyop theory is the idea of the gynocentric state.
Right.
Now, we all know the term glass ceiling, right? The idea that women can't reach the top. But Reicher completely flips that script and talks about something he calls the glass cellar. Break that down for us. What is the glass cellar? Well, the glass cellar is basically the concrete floor of society. It's the invisible foundation that civilization rests on, which, according to the data he pulls, is almost entirely populated by men.
Okay.
Reicher argues that while the media and, feminist activists focus exclusively on the lack of women in the boardroom,
Like the top 1% of desirable jobs.
exactly, they completely ignore the bottom 10% of jobs, the dangerous, dirty, and lethal jobs.
And he brings some heavy statistics to back this up.
He really does. He cites the 2023 Bureau of Labor Statistics report, and the number that just jumps off the page is 93%.
93%.
That is the percentage of workplace fatalities that are men.
Wow.
We are talking about coal mines, deep-sea oil rigs, high-voltage line repair in ice storms, sewer maintenance. Reicher's point is that these men are dying literally to keep the lights on and the water running, but there is zero political push to get women into these roles.
Right. You don't see hashtags demanding 50% female representation in the sanitation department or on deep sea rigs.
Exactly. And Reicher argues this proves the gynocentric nature of the state. He says the system is completely happy to leverage male disposability. In this framework, men are viewed as utilities.
Like a battery or a generator.
Yes, like a machine. You use them up, and when they break, you just replace them. He argues that if the goal was truly equality, we would be talking about the death gap, not just the wage gap.
The death gap. That is a brutal way to phrase it, but the numbers don't lie. And speaking of disposability, the financial numbers regarding health funding that he dug up, I genuinely had to reread that section.
It is really stark contrast. He pulls data directly from the National Institutes of Health, the NIH.
And what were the numbers there?
The allocation was $6.2 billion specifically for women's health initiatives.
Okay, 6.2 billion, and for men,
Only 900 million.
900 million versus 6.2 billion. That is a massive discrepancy.
Especially when you consider the actual health outcomes. That's the kicker here. Men die, on average, 5 years earlier than women. The suicide rate for men is roughly 4 times higher than for women.
4 times higher.
Yeah, yet the funding is skewed 7 to 1 in favor of women. So Riker argues this is a clear indicator that the state functions essentially as a resource extraction machine against men.
How does he mean extraction?
Well, men pay the majority of federal income taxes, yet that money is redistributed to services that prioritize women, while men's health is treated as a complete afterthought.
It's the definition of taxation without representation,
Yeah.
or at least taxation without consideration. And this idea of men being utilities, it segues perfectly into his analysis of the legal system. Chapter 1 is actually called The Lie of Equality, and he goes straight for the throat of the family courts.
This is where the book becomes very difficult for a lot of guys to read because it hits so close to home. Riker describes family court as he calls it a slaughterhouse for fathers.
A slaughterhouse.
Yeah. He notes that despite decades of societal talk about equality, 80% of child custody awards still go to mothers.
And he makes a very specific point that this isn't just because dads are absent or don't want custody.
Correct. He highlights numerous cases where the father was a nearly equal or fully involved parent prior to the divorce, but the moment the gavel drops, the system defaults to the mother. Riker uses a very powerful phrase here to describe this legal shift. He says the law views fatherhood as contingent.
Contingent.
Mm-hmm.
Like a subscription service the state can just cancel.
Exactly that. Motherhood is viewed by the courts as authentic, biological, untouchable. Fatherhood is viewed as a legal privilege that can be revoked at the whim of a judge.
And the consequences of that revocation are lethal, right?
Yeah.
He connects the dots directly between the loss of custody and that male suicide epidemic we just mentioned.
He does. The CDC reports that divorced men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than married men.
3 times.
And Riker argues this is causation, not coincidence. When you strip a man of his children, his house, his assets, and his fundamental role as a protector.
Which is essentially his entire identity.
Right. You push him toward what Riker calls existential annihilation.
Man, it really is framed as a war for survival. And Riker argues that this war on male identity doesn't just start in the courtroom when you're an adult. It starts way earlier. It starts in the classroom. This section on the war on boyhood was, frankly, infuriating to read.
It is a sweeping, systemic critique of modern education. Riker argues that schools have literally pathologized masculinity itself. If you look at the modern classroom, it is entirely designed for the female temperament.
Sit still, face forward.
Right. Verbalize your emotions, be compliant, don't disrupt.
And boys don't fit that mold.
Not at all. Boys are biologically wired differently. They are more likely to be fidgety, competitive, physical, rough. Riker argues that instead of accommodating this natural energy, schools treat it as a medical disorder.
Which explains the medication rates.
Exactly. This is why boys are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than girls. Riker actually calls it chemical pacification. He says we are drugging an entire generation of boys simply because they don't act like girls.
And then there's the psychological aspect he dives into. He talks about the empathy trap. I found this fascinating because, usually empathy is sold to us as a universally good thing.
Right, but Riker argues that emotional literacy programs in schools are actually just compliance training in disguise.
Right.
Here is the double standard he points out. If a boy is assertive or gets into a shoving match, which is classic male conflict resolution,
Right, quick and physical.
he is immediately punished for toxic masculinity or violence. But if a girl engages in relational aggression,
Gossip or social exclusion.
exactly, or destroying a reputation on social media, she is rarely punished in the same way. It's treated as just navigating complex emotions.
So the male way of handling conflict, which is usually direct and over quickly, is criminalized. But the female way, which is covert and psychological, is enabled.
Precisely. And this teaches boys from a very young age that their natural instincts are evil. It creates a deep internalized sense of shame about simply being a boy. And this is compounded by what he calls the erasure of heroes.
Oh, the UK study he mentioned.
Yes. He cites a study from the UK that found while 94% of boys could easily name a Disney princess, A shocking number of them could not name a single male hero from contemporary media.
That is just sad. We've completely killed the archetype.
We really have. Schools have banned superhero play. They've banned tag. They've banned anything deemed aggressive games. So boys are growing up in a cultural vacuum. They don't have a template for what a good, strong man looks like.
They only know what a bad man looks like.
Exactly, because that's what they are warned about constantly.
And Riker doesn't just say this is some accidental cultural drift. He traces the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists. He says this was the plan. This is where we get into the real red pill history lesson.
Yeah, this is chapter 11, and for anyone listening who is interested in political theory, this is the absolute backbone of the book. Riker traces the lineage of these modern gender ideologies all the way back to the Frankfurt School.
So thinkers like Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse.
Yes. His argument is that when traditional economic Marxism failed to take hold in the West, mainly because the working class was getting richer and didn't actually want a revolution, these theorists had to pivot.
They needed a new proletariat.
Exactly. They rebranded class warfare as gender warfare. They replaced the bourgeoisie versus proletariat framework with men versus women. Riker cites Shulamith Firestone, a radical feminist who explicitly argued that the nuclear family is the primary unit of oppression that must be destroyed.
And why the nuclear family? Why is that the specific target for them?
Because the father stands directly between the individual and the state. Riker argues that the ultimate goal of these ideologies is to remove the father as the primary provider and authority figure. If you remove the dad, who steps in to become the provider.
The state.
Right. It creates total state dependency.
So the whole concept of the patriarchy.
Riker argues patriarchy is essentially a conspiracy theory. It's a myth invented to justify this massive power grab. He says patriarchy is the boogeyman used to justify extracting resources from men.
Like their labor, their taxes, the draft.
Yes, while simultaneously denying them any rights or gratitude. It frames the actual victim as the oppressor so you can rob him without any moral guilt.
And they pull this off by changing how we speak. The weaponization of language section. This part about the trivium logic, grammar, and rhetoric was really high-level stuff.
It is. Riker argues that if you corrupt grammar, you corrupt thought itself. He points to a Stanford study mentioned in the book regarding gender-neutral language. The findings were incredible. They suggested that students taught with exclusively gender-neutral terms actually scored lower on logical reasoning tests.
Wait, really? Just changing the words made them less logical.
That's the claim, based on the study. The argument is that ambiguity in language breeds ambiguity in thought. When you replace specific historical terms like fireman or chairman with mushy, gender-neutral terms, you aren't just being inclusive, you are actively severing the link between men and utility. You are erasing male history.
And he also talks about how the word safety has been weaponized.
This is a great example of concept creep. Safety used to mean I won't get hit by a falling rock or I won't get mugged. Now, Riker argues, safety means emotional comfort. And this shift allows institutions to claim that a man's mere presence or his disagreement makes a woman feel unsafe.
So if I disagree with you in a meeting, I'm committing violence.
In their framework, yes. It allows for the punishment of men simply for existing in a space where they aren't wanted. It's a tool to enforce ideological conformity. If you speak up, you aren't just wrong, you are dangerous.
And the result of all this gaslighting and suppression, we get to what he calls the sexual marketplace collapse. Riker paints a pretty bleak picture of modern dating for guys.
He cites CDC data showing that 35% of young men haven't had sex in the last year.
35%. That is a staggering number historically.
It's unprecedented. He describes a landscape of runaway hypergamy where women who are now empowered by dating apps and endless social validation are chasing a tiny percentage of top-tier men.
Leaving the vast majority of regular guys where? Exactly.
Completely invisible. Riker calls them the leftover men. These are the guys who played by the rules, they went to school, they got the job, they were the nice guys, and now they are completely locked out of the reproductive future of the species.
And usually, historically, these guys would have a brotherhood to fall back on, a community. But Riker says even that has been taken away.
The betrayal of the brotherhood. This is a crucial point in the book. Riker details how male-only spaces, the Boy Scouts, fraternities, lodges, even the local gym, have been systematically infiltrated or dismantled. They've been sued into letting women in, or they've just been banned outright.
I actually remember reading about gyms banning staring or heavy lifting because it was deemed intimidating.
Exactly. Riker argues that vital male bonding happens in these exclusive competitive spaces. When you destroy them, you isolate men. And as we know, isolation is lethal. He cites a Harvard study showing that men with close male friends are 50% less likely to commit suicide.
50%.
Right. So by destroying the locker room, society is effectively removing the primary life support system for male mental health.
That is incredibly heavy. We're systematically destroying the very things that keep men alive. But to his credit, Riker doesn't just leave us in the pit. He does offer a ladder out. He calls for restoration. So what is the solution here?
His solution is twofold. It's intellectual and institutional. First, men have to reclaim the trivium. You have to learn logic. You have to be able to spot the fallacies in these arguments so you aren't constantly manipulated by emotional reasoning. You need to be able to articulate why the gaslighting is happening.
Don't just get mad, get smart.
Precisely. And secondly, you need parallel institutions. He mentions real-world movements like the Iron Brotherhood and Stoic Sons. These are mentorship groups, but they aren't therapy circles. Riker argues that traditional talk therapy is designed for women. Men heal through action.
Action over talk.
Yes, building things, taking on physical challenges, practicing martial arts, and reading philosophy, specifically Stoicism, like Marcus Aurelius. Riker's core message is that men need to stop begging for inclusion in a system that fundamentally hates them. Stop knocking on the door of the institution that locked you out. Build your own house. Build a counter-civilization.
Sovereignty. That seems to be the word that keeps coming up in his work.
It is. Stop apologizing for your nature.
Yeah.
Stop internalizing the shame they push on you. Riker's final verdict is that you don't need the system's permission to be a man. You just need to wake up, realize the whole thing is a psyop, and walk away from their game.
Wake up. That is the ultimate call to action. Look, we have really just scratched the surface of this book today. Feminist, Misandrist, Agit, props, satanic communist psyops against boys, men, and masculinity is a massive text. As we said, it is ultra long, it is incisive, and it is absolutely fascinating, regardless of where you stand politically.
It connects the dots in a way that very few books dare to do. It's a history of institutional capture that finally explains why the world feels the way it does right now for so many men.
So here is what you need to do. If this conversation triggered an aha moment for you, go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now. Search for Conrad Riker. Buy the ebook. Support this kind of work because it is incredibly rare. And you need to follow him. Go to Substack, find @Conrad and Riker, follow him on Twitter, get this information directly from the source.
Knowledge is the only defense against a psyop. You have to arm yourself intellectually.
Exactly. And finally, if you appreciate us bringing you these forbidden conversations, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to The Deep Dive. We are going to keep going where others simply won't. Oh, and I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If society is truly entirely dependent on that concrete floor of male utility, what happens on the day those leftover men simply decide to stop maintaining it? Think about that. Thanks for listening.
Stay awake out there.
See you on the next Deep Dive.